ничего себе, иди. Bushido, diciamo. Come on. вообще там here wanted to finish this. Finish it.
Don't measure up. But by now, I bet you're wondering what kind of frightening drill sergeant teacher will be instructing you, right? Well, not to worry, your instructor will be either a civilian native speaker or a highly educated military language instructor, or MLI.
Then you have your MLIs, military language instructors like me, guys in uniform, been through the course, and we've done the mission. Remember how hard it was to learn a foreign language. If you can make it here, you can make it through anything.
And there are about 1,900 of these guys. Where do they find them?
Our instructors and faculty come from around the world, from over 90 different countries. As a language training facility that trains in 17 different languages, we have linguists, instructors from over 90 countries that come here to Monterey to support that training institute.
First-class international staff, musicians even. It's really impressive. But let's not pretend that it's all smooth sailing at the DLI. The atmosphere in the classroom can get tense. In the early days, it's high stress with the fast pace of learning. Cultural clashes happen as well, even between students and teachers. Different political views, different outlooks on life. It certainly isn't straightforward.
Well, here's a good example of it. I was like a month into the course, and my instructor said, read this passage, and it was in Russian. So I read it in Russian, and she said, all right, what is it saying? So I swapped to English, because I was going to translate it. But she said, no, say it in Russian. Explain your idea in Russian. And I was like, frick, all right, cool. And I'm trying to piece together some things, my grammar's awful and so on. I start speaking, and the moment I started talking, she started putting her head down and her hands on her desk and rubbing her face. And I finished, and she said, that was absolute. And I said, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm 19, and I've never learned a language before.
So let's find out more about what actually goes on inside the classroom, including that scream and scribble that I mentioned earlier.
Fühlen Sie sich auch vom Auf und Ab der Aktienmärkte überfordert? Hallo, ich bin Harry Weinfurt. Sie kennen mich noch als Moderator von der Preis.
No matter what language you are learning, it is going to be insanely fast-paced and difficult. Classes are Monday to Friday and pretty much all day long.
So because we were military, then our day always started really early in the morning, and we'd have morning formation where we could do uniform inspections, we'd have announcements, that sort of thing. And then we'd be in the classroom by about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And we had 6 total hours of language learning throughout the day.
Thankfully, you do get a 10-minute break every hour, and you knock off at 3:30 in the afternoon, but there's no relaxing yet. In fact, that is not even half of what the day looks like. Just wait and see. Another interesting thing that happens is, depending on your language, there may also be a lot of different ranks in your class. So if you are a private, you could easily have a captain or even a sergeant sitting right next to you. So it's got to be fun, right? Never mind the mix of different branches all learning together in the same room. I wonder what this was like.
It was always interesting navigating the different military cultures. There was Air Force, Army, Marine, and we had one Navy most of the time. And each branch has different standards and, you know, different things they have to do during the week to fulfill their military purpose. And so it was interesting seeing everyone try to balance that with the language learning.
So first day, first class, first lesson, what's that like?
It's your first day, the teacher comes in, we're all nervous, we're sitting in the class, and I've never spoken to a Russian person before. The teacher comes in speaking Russian, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying. Like, I don't know what to do. But initially, they switched to English because they know that you don't understand anything. You go over the alphabet, you practice your handwriting, then they teach you all the cursive and all that. After 2 days, they say, okay, we bless you with the alphabet and make the cross symbol. Now let's start learning things. We were expected to know everything now, so we started learning words and grammar. But it depends. If you have Arabic, they spend more time on that. They call it sound and script. It's an initial 3-week course where you go over the Arabic alphabet.
Yeah, so for languages with a different script, like Arabic, they'll spend up to a month on basic alphabet and sounds before even getting to the vocabulary. if you caught that thing Jack said, sound and script, this is a daily session before classes where students are introduced to the most basic vocabulary to get used to what the script actually looks like. Apparently this class has earned the nickname Scream and Scribble. I'll leave it to your imagination to figure out why. But the idea is to prep the soldiers for success in the challenging weeks to come. Because at some point, even the instructions in the class are going to be all in Arabic. And we'll see some examples of what actual classroom activities look like in just a second. Okay, so an important question from me at this point. What percentage of the time are you hearing only the target language versus getting taught actually in English? Because if you remember from my video on the Mormon Missionary Training Center, those guys have a very strict no English rule right from the beginning.
The majority of the instruction was in kind of a mix of English and Korean. When we first started, there was a lot more English, but as we learned the language, we got more Korean. All of our professors would speak in Korean and then explain in English again. And so the grammar fits. Every day we had maybe a paragraph or a little dialogue piece that was in Korean that we were studying from. And there would be new pieces of grammar, new verb endings, new ways of saying things that are talked about in that paragraph, and we would learn from that. And all the vocabulary for that day would be in that paragraph. So they would be teaching from these paragraphs every day.
In the beginning, they do speak a decent bit of English to us, just to make sure we're understanding these grammar concepts. They would explain the concepts in English and then switch to Russian. And they'd say, let me show you how this looks in the actual Russian. So the instruction aspect would be in English to make sure you understand it, and then all the practice and application, they would switch to Russian. But then we would do things where we would have, okay, wait, let's take a step back. The course itself was divided into 3 semesters. And in each semester, you'd have a main theme. So the first semester for Russian, we did history. The second semester, we did geography. And the third semester was culture. So take the history class. The entire lesson was in Russian. And we really didn't understand anything. I learned how to say the pencil is on the desk. And the teacher started telling us about Soviet history. And they know you don't understand most of what's being said. But it would get you familiar with hearing the language. You have workbooks with the text in front of you, so you're trying to match what you're hearing with what you're reading.
Yeah, so having the context for that would obviously be helpful, knowing the topic. I like that as you progress on the course, the teachers speak less and less English, and eventually no English. There will also be an hour during the day with a military instructor, talking about military-specific things. I imagine the vocabulary in general has been quite specific in the military. I wonder, are there any constraints on what's taught?
There was a little bit. For example, we didn't learn a lot of religious words, but we did a lot of political words. The language program itself is 63 weeks long. And so in that time frame, we cover about 3 years of college level language. So by the time we're done in our 63 weeks, then we're pretty fluent in a lot of different areas. Politics, communication, media. There's a lot of things that we did learn that was specific for our job, but not as much as you would think at DLI. We had a second school in Texas where we did more job-related language.
And that's obviously the Air Force School in Texas. I believe they break the day's lessons into 1-hour blocks for reading, listening, and speaking skills. So how do these lessons work?
Смотри, сейчас в интернете куча предложений, онлайн-профессий, таргетолог, продюсер, дизайнер, там и прочее. Это очень конкурентный рынок, и на нем реально мало кто зарабатывает более 100 тысяч рублей. И при этом есть...
We'd have 1 hour with one teacher who would teach us about a specific grammar point, and then the next hour would be about, like how in English we have Latin roots, in Korean there are Chinese roots. We'd spend a whole hour learning specific roots so that we could expand and have an easier time recognizing words.
Okay, so they start you off with simple sentences and important words, eventually talking more and more about word roots, conjugations, noun declensions, and so on.
When we learned Korean, we started with basic words and phrases like hello, how are you, nice to see you
full sentences is the best way to learn. A typical exercise they're given at this stage is something like this. Here is your root word. Now here is a sentence. Figure out what form of this word is correct for the sentence. And with a language like Arabic, it's really important to choose the right prefixes and suffixes, or the meaning, in a military context at least, very often changes to something quite different. And you certainly don't want to be saying the wrong thing out in the field. Now the method is known for making heavy use of structured repetition. So if the students are given 25 new words to learn for a test, then all day those words will come up in the grammar lessons over and over again. And it goes like this constantly, lots of reinforcement. Now here's something that you won't get in a lot of other language schools, and it's pretty cool. Dialects in a language are taught right from the beginning in the classroom. So if you're learning Arabic, for example, you'll get 1 to 2 hours of foundational modern standard Arabic each day, for example, but then you'll get trained in various dialects of Arabic. Mind you, a lot of soldiers these days are first learning the dialects in the field and then picking up standard Arabic at the school afterwards. And learning these dialects is so important.
Picture this. You're supporting ground operations, and you get some intelligence that says your unit's about to walk into an ambush. You're not going to have time to use a dictionary, consult the internet, or run it through a whole chain of command to QC your work. It's just you, and the confidence in your abilities.
You are, of course, in safe hands. All these instructors are bilingual and know how to explain even the most difficult grammar or idiomatic expressions of those dialects. So let's explore the structure and goals of the program. At the DLI, there are 4 levels to reach native speaker fluency, or you can go even higher if you want to. But in order to pass and graduate, you just have to reach level 2, which means being able to understand the gist of a conversation or accurately pick out the facts from like a news broadcast, for example, who, what, when, where, why. At level 3, your understanding can far more intuitive. You can pick up on someone's intent and motive and so on. Whether you reach that level or not, well, is up to you. But certain jobs are going to require that level of understanding, like CIA, for example. So what is the primary skill that most people in the program focus on? Is it a speaking practice?
Yes, there was a lot of speaking practice in class. Our tests were always listening, reading, and speaking. The goal was always to improve speaking alongside of the other skills, but our final test at the end of the course was more weighted towards listening and reading than speaking.
And this makes sense for Elle, obviously, because her future job is going to entail mostly listening in Korean. But guys who will be operating in military attaché capacities, for example, will naturally need a lot more speaking practice to prepare themselves. So it really depends on what they're going to be doing in the field. And then, as you progress, you do more and more comprehension work, looking for meaning in texts, making deductions based on things that are said. And this kind of work will be familiar to my students in my story learning programs, because working on understanding and uncovering the language from a context is the main priority, using story in our case. But I am interested to see how they balance speaking versus comprehension at the DLI, because I can see how learning to say stuff can be absolutely critical in the field from the beginning. You can imagine